at the center of God's story is this people, the people of Israel, who are flawed. The Lord himself has a lot of criticisms and rebukes for them throughout the scriptures. But in Israel, we see a picture of ourselves
Hmm.
and how we respond to what the Bible calls the controversy of Zion. It very much reveals our own hearts, how we relate to the grace that he's given us.
Hey everyone, welcome to Spirit and Truth Podcast. This is Lee Cummings, your host, and I'm very excited today because I have a good friend of mine. He's been on here a couple of different times. Joel Richardson is, in my opinion, one of the leading voices on the subject of Bible prophecy, eschatology, specializing, really zooming in on the influence or the part that Islam is playing and potentially will play in the unfolding of prophetic events. But he's not limited to just that. He just recently wrote a brand new book called The Gospel of the Skull Crusher. What an incredible title to a book. If you don't know anything about that book, it is a high-level introductory look at all of the prophetic scriptures of the Messiah throughout the Gospels. It's a beautiful book. It just came out. And along with all of his other books, I would encourage you to find them on Amazon or wherever books are sold. Joel, thank you so much for being with me today.
You betcha, Lee. Thanks for having me on.
Good to see you. I love your set. We were just talking about it behind you there. Some of the significant pieces. One of them is from Saudi. You just got back from Saudi Arabia, didn't you?
Yeah, each time I go on a trip, I always I'll bring back some souvenirs. So I just added in Saudi Arabia, the traditional tea or coffee pot, it's called the dala. They really, take pride in it's kind of a symbol of Saudi culture. And when we're there out in the desert with the Bedouins, they always have a fire with a few dollars sitting around and they're serving us coffee. So yeah, I like all my little trinkets and so forth. I got my wine press
There you
that
go.
is actually the imprint for my self-publishing, and yeah, my menorah for the purpose of trolling all of the
Yes.
goiters out there and
Yes.
exercising the demons as they're watching and so forth.
And then I see a skull crusher over there as well. Connect that to your new book.
Yeah, so I actually carved this out of walnut. I had intended to make it part of a bigger piece, and then I added, I think you can see the spike or the tent peg in that
Oh, yeah.
from the story of Sisera, Jael and Sisera, which is super cool. So in Judges 5, y'all know the story of this incredible, awesome Kenite woman who drives the tent peg through Sisera, the commander of the armies of Baal. But then later in Zechariah 10, Zechariah, looking back at that, he says, "For the Lord of hosts, the Lord of armies has visited his flock, the house of, or the tents of Judah." And he says, "From them," of course, we know from Judah will come the Messiah. He says, "From them will come the majestic war horse. From them will come the cornerstone. From them will come the tent peg." So Zechariah actually
Wow.
refers to the Messiah, and he calls the Messiah the tent peg, which is piercing the skull of the enemies of the God of Israel. So just, yep, a lot of neat stuff that I like. And of course, the
Yeah.
pomegranate.
I love it. I love it. What many of you don't know is that Joel is also an artisan. I mean, we kind of got to know each other a little bit, like during the COVID pandemic, because you were rebinding Bibles, and I have a passion for that. And so you rebound a few Bibles, and then yeah, look, you can see a whole line of them. And has gotten into iconography and working with wood. So there's a lot of these things that you see. Uh, Joel's kind of a Da Vinci type of guy. He's got a lot going on. Talk about uh, maybe give us an introduction to your new book. Tell everybody about this. I thought, I'll just tell you, I haven't told you since you sent it to me. It's got to be one of the most beautiful, like physically, aesthetically beautiful books that I have seen in a long time. I think that kind of reflects your desire to add a lot of beauty into truth. But talk about the Gospel of the Skull Crusher. Give everybody kind of the elevator pitch to that.
Yeah, well, thank you for mentioning that. Yeah, look, I wanted to create a book with the sort of the loneliness of technology that we're all experiencing, and even the anxiety and the detachment that's coming from technology, so many people are wanting to get back to nostalgic things. They go out in the country and they cuddle with cows and play mandolins or do goat yoga or whatever. I mean, and so with this, I really wanted to create a book. I wrapped it with linen, gold foil. I've got a gold ribbon, and it's filled with beautiful art. I want it to be the type of book that people actually want to read, the type of book that you like to hold, almost like a nice Bible that has been rebound with goat leather, this sort of thing. You want to sit on your back patio and sip a cup of coffee and enjoy the experience of reading again.
Yeah, yeah,
So I was trying to get back to that. So again, to, as you said, add beauty to truth. But what the book is it is a survey of messianic prophecy and the covenants, which are simply God's promises, beginning with the Genesis 3:15 proto-evangelion, the first gospel, the story of the two seed lines, which forms the backbone of the entire biblical narrative. So it's all about Jesus, but it's all about Jesus throughout the entire Bible. And by looking at God's promises, by looking at what he said he was going to accomplish through the Messiah, we learn what the gospel story is. Because, in my opinion, the gospel is not simply in the New Testament. It's not simply that Jesus came and died on the cross to save our souls. It's the story of cosmic redemption. God has promised to restore all things, every facet of the planet, of society, of culture, of the arts, our physical body, everything is going to be restored to that perfect, paradisal, Edenic state. And that will be, of course, combined with the restoration of the throne of David, the kingdom of Israel, if you will. That's an undeniable component of the story. So I'm trying to help people read the gospel or see the gospel afresh in the way that it was intended to be seen, which is, I would say, a bit more of a masculine telling. So, talking about the lost boys that everyone talks about, Gen Z, most of them growing up without fathers, just playing video games, addicted to porn, just sort of detached from what you and I knew as masculine, and really telling the gospel from a masculine perspective. It's actually at times a pretty violent story. The most consistent way that Jesus is described throughout the scriptures is as the divine warrior. And also telling the gospel from I'll say, an Israel-centric perspective. And of course, that's a
right.
very important issue right now because of the rise of anti-Semitism, both within and outside of the church. And so, yeah. And also, I wrote it in an extremely simplified way. I actually aimed for, and this was actually probably the most challenging part. I literally, Lee, tried to simplify this for about an 18-year-old readership level. So
Wow.
heavy theology that literally a high schooler could read, but adults can also get, it's
Yeah.
pastoral level theology, but written very simply. So
No,
there's your elevator pitch.
it's been written very well. I've read through about 2/3 of it, and I would say uh, very concise, no wasted words, but not hyperfluous. It's not a lot of high thinking theological terminology. It's broken down really well. So I would just encourage everybody really, to get a copy of it, because it's a real panoramic view of the redemption story from Genesis to Revelation. It's a revelation of Jesus. It helps, I think, put together pieces and connect dots that maybe people who've grown up in church have never put together before, to carry the thread of redemption throughout the entirety of Scripture. So I highly recommend it. Uh, what was it that, Joel, I've known, I think the first book of yours that I read was The Islamic Antichrist, Mideast Beast, then Sinai to Zion, When a Jew Rules the World. All of these, most of what you have written has a highly eschatological and time feel to it. What was it about this subject of the gospel of the skull crusher that connected with what you have written in the past? What was it that kind of came on you to write this book? What was it motivated you?
So I only write when I feel inspired. That's been my rule. When an author gets in the rut of, that's their career and they just keep writing, I think the quality and the inspiration that you can sense when you read their books just decreases. And so for me, the inspiration, the passion behind this is to communicate the gospel. I would say this, as I already said, so much of the church today has such a truncated, minimalistic idea of the gospel. It's just Jesus came to save you from what?
Right, right,
Hell. And of course, that is true, but it's, as I said, truncated. It's just a minimalistic gospel. Whereas to me, in theological circles, they'll call it the spiritual model vision versus the new creation model,
hmm,
which is to say, after we die, the spiritual vision model would say, we just go to heaven forever. You'll still see reflections of this in the church. After you die, you better get, if you didn't like worship today, you better get used to it because you're going to be in heaven
uh,
doing it forever.
forever.
You're just going to be in the clouds as a ghost singing. We'll recognize those that go before us, this type of thing. And look, that's again better than hell, but it's not what the Bible teaches. The Bible teaches, as I said, cosmic redemption, the renewal of all things. I love these phrases when you see Peter and he talks about the restoration of all things, of
Right,
which
right,
all of the prophets have spoken. So this is the holistic, as I said, cosmic message of redemption that resonates with the human heart. It doesn't matter if you're a Christian, non-Christian, man, woman, or child. It resonates with us because this is what we were created for. He
right.
gave us bodies. He gave us taste buds, eyes, sight, sounds. All of these things are part of the creation. And so I want to tell the gospel in a way that resonates with the people that the gospel was intended for, which is the poor of the earth, those who are suffering, the persecuted, the rejected, the marginalized, those who have no other hope. If we want to present a hope that the gospel communicates, it has to be a hope of substance. So I want to communicate that holistic message. And then also, as I said, the gospel in a bit more of a biblical or even masculine way as it's intended to be told. And that's not to minimize the beautiful, emotional, covenantal, marital elements of the story, but to tell, Jesus is coming back to crush his enemies like grapes. He's coming back to put an end to the wickedness, all of the things that make us exhausted: sin, sickness, dictators, oppressors, those that exploit the poor. And then again, at the heart of it, as I said, the Israel centric component, because the scriptures are also clear that as we approach the last days, and we're seeing this right now, the Lord is going to give the nations a cup of staggering, as it says in Zechariah, a cup of drunkenness, and they are going to drink deeply. They're going to become drunk with an irrational hatred of Israel. And, this is obviously a very nuanced, complicated subject, but at the center of God's story is this people, the people of Israel, who are flawed. The Lord himself has a lot of criticisms and rebukes for them throughout the scriptures. But in Israel, we see a picture of ourselves
Hmm.
and how we respond to what the Bible calls the controversy of Zion. It very much reveals our own hearts, how we relate to the grace that he's given us. So again, just trying to tell the
Yeah.
story as it was intended to be told. So basically, what I'm trying to do is inoculate people to a lot of the bad ideas that are exploding out there, but to do so not in a negative way, not by criticizing replacement theology or criticizing, preterism, just by telling the gospel. If you know the big story, you're inoculated to a lot of the bad ideas and doctrines that are exploding in the church.
It it surprises me. I wonder if it surprises you how many Christians, especially American Western Christians, either live ignorant or are shocked and surprised when you talk about not just the past, but the future of God's redemptive purposes, that Israel has a place and that God still has a covenantal commitment to Jewish people. Sometimes when you have those conversations, or as a pastor like me, you preach a message like that, I'm shocked at how many people find that to be such a, a novel concept or a staggering idea. That I mean, especially in the especially the cultural moment we're in right now since October 7th, 2023, with the war taking place in Gaza and how that has escalated. The Intifada has become globalized. I wasn't surprised by the level of vitriol or hatred of the Jewish people in the nations, but I was shocked by the misunderstanding, the lack of clarity, and even some of the, at best, indifference that was taking place within the church. Did that shock you, like it shocked me, or is that something you saw coming?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it for years, and there are a lot of reasons for this. People today, it's almost as though we in the West, but modern thinkers, again, our brains are being rewired by social media. We're not able to think beyond sound bites. And one of the things that we continually fall prey to are these false dichotomies. So every argument is presented as, well, do you think it's this or this? And the Jewish mind goes, it's mostly this and a little bit of this, but let's discuss it and let's look at it from three different perspectives so we can understand the nuance. And Paul the Apostle is kind of almost annoyingly the master of this, quite frankly. He's always going off on these bunny trails and he's discussing complexity
Right.
and nuance. And it's like we don't have the ability to even see or understand nuance. It's no, it's this, no, it's this. I mean, we're seeing it right now. Everyone's blaming one another. You're the reason we lost the elections. And the Bible, look, life is complicated. People are complicated. If there's one thing the past few years have taught us with all of the scandals, is the world is very complicated. I just got back from the Blurry Creatures
Oh,
conference,
you
which,
were there? You were there for
yeah.
that?
And I'll tell you, this here's a Christian podcast. Um, Luke Rogers, a lot of people don't know. So Luke Rogers is actually Aaron Rodgers' brother,
Yeah.
and Nate, and these guys have, been doing this Christian podcast. They discuss fringe topics like Bigfoot, aliens. But here's the thing, Lee, this is what's amazing is you would not believe the amount of lives that are being changed, people being saved left and right. Like the spirit is moving. There was a woman who got profoundly healed at this conference, and they do it by having fun and everything. But one of their mottos is life is blurry.
Mm.
And a couple years ago, particularly as a Bible teacher, or you as a pastor in the Protestant evangelical world, we're expected to have all of what's your statement of faith? How come you don't have a statement of faith on your website? Well, where do you stand on Calvinism, on soteriology, on this? Like we're expected to have absolute dogmatic clarity on every little thing. And there are a lot of things that I do have dogmatic adamancy about. I'm firm on certain issues, obviously eschatology and biblical hope, these type of things. But the reality is there's a lot of things that are blurry. And I'm okay. At this point in my life, I'm okay saying, I don't know where to put that. I don't know where to file that. I don't know how to make this work. Who was this individual? Who is he? Is this real? Is this
Right,
fake? I don't
right.
know. The world is blurry and yeah, and it's just we as the Western modern society, we don't have the ability to see complexity or nuance, and we're dealing with some of the most complicated,
Yeah.
nuanced, challenging topics as we approach the last days, and it's just like it really is like a mind
Yeah.
virus has come over people, and they're just throwing themselves into reactionism
Yeah.
and rage, and
Well,
it's
you said
terrifying.
Zechariah 12. He said it's a cup of reeling. I will make it a heavy stone. Uh, I think we're living and seeing that begin to take maturity, right? We're not there yet, but I was just having this conversation with somebody the other day about this subject, the subject of Israel, the subject of the Jewish people, why the insanity of anti-Semitism just seems to be breeding like bacteria. And I said something to him. I said, "Look, it's never going to get better than it is today. Today is as easy and as clear and as understandable as it's ever going to be. It's just going to get heavier. That stone of that issue is going to get heavier, and it's just like a cup of wine or alcoholic beverage. The more of it you sip, the drunker you get, and the more inebriated you get. And the nations are drinking from that cup, and it literally does seem to be like an insanity or an inebriation. You know as well as I do, people get drunk, they do things, say things, go places that they never would have in their right minds. And then they wake up the next morning and realize, I can't believe I did that. It's almost like we're seeing that happen, like a spirit of the age is just like a mind virus that is taking over the algorithm. It's taking over the communication to a generation, even places like UN and institutional formations. Where do you think that this is going in the near future? I mean, is this obviously we know it's going to continue until the Lord returns, but I mean, do you have some insight into what you think is going to happen even now on the hindsight of the so-called peace deal in Gaza?
So you're absolutely right. It's a mind virus. Like you're looking at Candace Owens, who, by the way, for anyone, I've actually had a few friends in my life that slipped into schizophrenia. And for anyone watching, this woman is mentally ill and
Yeah.
she is slipping into mental illness. That's very clear. But people are listening to her as though she is the source of secret knowledge and insight and all these conspiracy theories and so forth. But it really is a mind virus. And as you said in Zechariah, it's two things. It's a cup of drunkenness, and they're not just sipping, Lee. They are guzzling. They are
Mm,
guzzling that mind virus, but it centers around the issue of Israel. You've always said it that the controversy of Zion, Isaiah 34, it's like a tropical storm. I've used this analogy off the coast of
mm,
Florida or something. It starts out a little tropical storm. Next thing you know, that thing is just engulfing the entire East Coast. It's eating up, the entire coastline, and the whole world eventually, like a magnet, is getting pulled into this controversy. Why aren't we discussing the in disproportionate loss of life in what India is doing in Kashmir, or the disproportionate loss of life that Turkey is engaging in northern Syria with the Kurds? No one's discussing that. Israel, Israel, Israel. Everyone's
right,
getting
right.
pulled into the controversy of Zion. But the other analogy that Zechariah uses is the heavy stone. And it says, if you actually read the language in the Hebrew, it says, all who attempt to lift this will be ruptured.
Mm.
And that language is basically, you mess with this thing, you're going to give yourself a hernia. And as the survivor of two hernias myself, thankfully in modern times we have surgeries. I am Mr. Kevlar mesh. I have bulletproof mesh covering my whole abdomen. But
That explains your abs. Now I know.
yeah, yeah, I had them form them. No, but like in before surgery, if you get a hernia, it's a very slow,
Mm,
painful death sentence. Your intestines pop through the abdominal lining. Eventually, they get cut off, and you die. It might take a year. It could take 5 years. And so it's like you said, people are drinking this cup. All of these kids now, 30 and under, particularly, they're being pulled in by the magnetism of cute, funny, angry memes and GIFs and so forth on social media, and it feels rebellious, and it feels like they're rebelling against the boomers. Pretty much anybody 40 or over now is a boomer, and they're outright saying, we're going to kill you. Like, these are
right.
conservatives. If you're an old school Reagan conservative, Rush Limbaugh conservative, God forbid Ted Cruz, and you still believe that we should stand with our friends, that we should support our allies, i.e., Israel, because Israel is, just from a completely non-spiritual perspective, a great ally. They
Yeah.
are a wall of defense in the Middle East. If you stand with Israel, then you are, a boomer. You're like Ted Cruz. You're just stupid. You don't know the Bible. And we're sick of spending all of our money. You've destroyed our future. We can't buy a house. And it's all because we're giving all of our money to those Jews. And they're listening to Candace Owens. And someday down the road, when the smoke clears and they wash the blood off of their hands after they've executed their fathers and destroyed the nation that they were born into, they're going to wake up with a profound hangover, a horrific hernia. And for those that are still alive, the scriptures are still going to be there for them. But it's terrifying. It's terrifying. Look, I've seen it for years. I've preached it for years. I've laid it all out, but here we are.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely breaking my heart. to see it actually happening.
And it really is even dividing in the American political scene. Uh, in the conservative movement, to see the Groypers and Nick Fuentes and Tucker Carlson, and you mentioned Candace Owen. These are people that they're not insinuating anything. I mean, they're blatantly talking about the protocols of the elders of Zion, scandals that the Jews, which represent 0.025% of the world's population, are trying to take it all over. It's the all of the ancient tropes, all of the things that people used to whisper in shadows and in corners are now being blasted on social media, podcasts, and even mainstream media. And it's not just the progressive left, it's the conservative right as well. And that's the first time I think that I've ever seen uh, those on the right that historically have stood with Israel because of their Judeo-Christian, maybe value morals and mores, all of a sudden now them coming into alignment with people on the left in an anti-Israel, anti-Semitic stance. It's really astounding.
Yeah. So you've got this term groypers, popularized by supporters of this kid Nick Fuentes,
Right,
this very popular podcaster influencer, which is basically a combination between gripers, they're always griping, and they're goy, they're Gentiles. That's actually the etymology or whatever the genesis of that word. So they're celebrating kind of white supremacy and look, every generation loves to rebel against their fathers.
right.
So, our fathers or this generation, we largely, again, because of the Bible or just general conservative values, have stood with Israel. But now we have not only theologians in the church, many of whom they're not anti-Semitic or not viscerally anti-Semitic, but they're providing bad theology, supersessionist theology. They're providing arguments for these guys. Not that most of them are delving deep into theology, but some of them are. And then you have again just the podcasters and people like Nick Fuentes, and they're outright like if you watch some of it, I mean they're outright like yes, like Hitler had aura, man. That guy was awesome. He was cool going down the street. Yeah, like it's or another guy like that is Andrew Tate.
Right,
So I look
right.
at okay, I look at Andrew Tate and I go, this guy is such a pathetic loser. Like the guy's literally a pimp who's made a living
Yeah.
exploiting women, be bragging about beating women. Oh, okay, cool. You worked out, you built your muscles, and you're bragging about beating women. And then you got Nick Fuentes, who is like in the those circles, it's well known that he's gay. Like, at parties, at these social media influencers party, a few people have seen him kissing guys. There was one time that he was streaming gay porn and he got caught. And these are the guys that the 30s and under are looking to as an example and a model of masculinity. And I'm looking at them and going, these guys are pathetic showboys.
Right.
And I'm not bashing homosexuals. I'm just saying these guys are presenting themselves as these conservative, manly men, and they're frauds. And they're just, again, stirring up anger. But here's the reality, and this is something that went unnoticed by me and a lot of people our age, is, the older you get, the decades roll by really quick.
Yeah, they do.
Well, if you're 30 and under, and white, you have not known a world that did not feel very hostile to you. And they're hopeless. They're going, we're in debt. We have no hope for the future. We can't buy a house, job situation looks horrible. I mean, right now, I just looked at my health care. It just went up $700 a month. I'm going to be paying $50,000 a year just on my baseline health insurance. And so they're looking at the hopelessness of their situation, and they've been yelled at if they're white, they're horrible, they're bad, they're the cause of all problems and so forth by the leftists. So they are reacting against it. But what they're doing is they're blaming us. They're blaming their fathers. They're saying, this is the world that you handed to us. And so there is rage and anger. So you have the reactionism of the left. I mean, the human propensity toward reactionism is, again, we don't have room for nuance. We just fling to these extremes. But on the right, they're reacting. And so okay, let me just say it this way. I grew up South Shore, Massachusetts during the 80s. My model, and we were a Democrat family. My father, we were lower middle class.
Right.
My father worked for UPS. He was part of the Teamsters Union. I had a bronze bust of JFK on my family mantle. Like, but anyway, our model was Kennedy liberalism versus Reagan conservatism. Well, those two things were not drastically different. What the kids today see as their options is either Western European globalism and liberalism, borderline Marxism, radical LGBT plus agenda. They've been forced, the transgender agenda and so forth. That's been forced on them, or Nazism, fascism, authoritarianism. They like these manly men, these leaders that come in and just flip the bird, and they think those are their options. And here's the sorry for talking so much. Here's the lesson is that as a premillennialist who believes it's not our job to conquer the world for Jesus, yes, we're to be politically engaged. We're not to lay down and roll over. Yes, we're to vote and get out the vote and all of those things. My ultimate hope is that the King and the Messiah is coming back to establish the kingdom of justice. To those on the left, guys, justice is coming. And righteousness, to those on the right, guys, righteousness is coming. He has promised these things in his word. So my hope is in that. And unfortunately, until then, there is no perfect system of government. We have to, unfortunately, patiently endure the status quo of this wicked age and try to, again, hold our ground as we patiently wait for the king to come back. And if he doesn't come back, then fine, you can spin off into Nazism or whatever and revolution. But the reality is, we're basically, as they think we're liberals. Again, if we
Right,
support
right.
Rush Limbaugh or Reagan, or they think we're liberals, but all we're saying is from a biblical perspective, we do have to bear the status quo, and they refuse to accept that. And I don't think it's going to end well for those that are trying to speak sense and common sense into the chaos. Once you get that frenetic revolutionary spirit, it's not until, as I said, the smoke clears and the blood is everywhere that
Yeah.
people begin to wake up from the stupor.
What's interesting is you can tell that there is something spiritual behind what is taking place because you have strange bedfellows. You have the alt right who are anti Semitic on the subject of Israel, Jewish people. And then you have the rise of um, Islamicists in America through immigration and other things like this, not just here, but in the West, Western Europe, like London and Paris and major epicenters of Western civilization. On the political sphere, they could not be further apart, but yet they're allied around this one issue, what you call and what is referred to as the controversy of Zion. To me, you can't get people to agree on anything politically. But when you find the one common issue that everybody has in common is their irrational hatred for the Jews. To me, that is a red flag indicator that this is a spiritual, behind the scenes uh, causation that is needs to be paid attention to in our day. I mean,
Yeah.
we even seen it last night. New York voted in the first Marxist, openly socialist, but also an Islamicist mayor of the largest city in the United States, and by all arguments, probably the capital of the economic system of the entire world. I mean, New York is the epicenter of the stock market, the S&P, world trade, all that kind of stuff. And here, New York City has a larger economy than the entire nation of Canada. And this guy is an Islamicist, openly anti-Semitic Marxist. Uh, to me, I think we are seeing things that I never thought I would see in my day, especially the merger of these two ideals.
And he's 34 years old.
Right. Never
30.
led anything.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and not that this means anything, but he can't even bench press two plates, like they,
Right.
they needed to assist him to lift 135 pounds. Okay. So I'm going to use the Lord of the Rings analogy.
Okay. Which one?
Um, Well, and again, I want to be clear, all analogies eventually break down, but
Right.
you've got the shadow is rising, Sauron, the orcs are about to sweep over the earth, and they're going to destroy the elves. They're going to destroy the dwarves. They're going to destroy the humans. They're going to destroy the hobbits. And, folks right now like Matt Walsh, he's furious because the right is infighting. Like, I'm sorry, Matt, but yes, I am going to stand up against Nazis. It's possible to reject the radical Marxist agenda while, again, also rejecting Nazism. He's
Right.
saying, no,
Right.
there's a saying, they're saying no enemies to the right. And I'm saying nonsense. Morality
Right.
matters. Like these, but I saw statistics that of the young Republicans in New York City, 40% support Nick Fuentes, the Groypers, the alt-right, the woke right, the pagan right is probably the best way to say it. You'll see all of these accounts on social media. If a crisis came, there'll be crosses, and they'll just jump in and just say "F you," back to the oven with you, Jew. Like just
Yeah, it's incredible.
horrific. They don't have the spirit of God. And I say that as someone who probably swears too much. I mean, like it's vile, like it's over the top. And the reality is, one, yes, I am going to call out the Nazis, but the bottom line is the orcs are about to sweep over everyone, and everyone's blaming the Jews. No, the Jews are the real problem. The dwarves are the problem. The elves are like, we will
Right.
never unite with the dwarves. And the bottom line is, unless we, and I'm not saying unite with the Nazis, but I am, and I need to be careful there. I'm not saying all of the Muslims are orcs.
Right.
But within this analogy, Hamas, what we're seeing in the UK, we're seeing with the radical Muslim agenda, because there's good people and bad people everywhere. I want to
Right.
be clear.
Right.
With the radical Muslims, you see them in the videos, you see MEMRI, the Middle East Media Research Institute, regularly putting up sermons of imams in the United States saying, we're going to conquer the United States.
Right.
I've had a couple social media accounts this past year. One of them had 1 million followers. Another one had over 300,000 in Canada, and they're openly saying like, we're going to slaughter you, me, in your house. We're going to come and slaughter you, and so this is, and they'll, go through and parse through all my videos and try to make me out to be this enemy of Islam and this type of thing. Like, look, obviously, I'm a Christian. I stand according to my doctrines. But here, I will add this. Here's what's interesting is when I look at some of these accounts, and again, I've gone viral in the Arab social media world. You'll see all the radical Islamists, the Ikhwanis that support the Muslim Brotherhood and the jihadists, and they're calling for my slaughter, usually because I'm a Zionist. But then you'll see all these other Arab Muslim comments, and they're like, no, what this guy's saying is right.
Mm.
Like we should be supporting what he's saying. So there's also a revolution, if you will, in the Islamic world where people want to get along,
Right.
to
Right.
exist, to coexist, and this type of thing. But unfortunately, as we see, it's always the loudest and the most active that tend to drive the conversation and the direction of things. And they're out breeding us by, 10 to 1,
Right. Right.
to use the idiocracy metaphor, the old movie Idiocracy. We're now in our 40s and pushing 50 and saying, oh, maybe we're going to have one child. We're not having kids.
Right.
And those that are, on welfare, or the Muslims that are having, 10 kids and, or, four wives and 15 kids, 20 kids. And the demographics, they catch up to you really fast.
Right.
And so Western civilization is aborting itself into oblivion. The Muslim world is breeding itself into the future. There's a very simple principle, which is the future belongs to those who show up for it. And I think that we may have learned that lesson too late.
Well, obviously, I know where you stand because you've written about it pretty prolifically. It's probably what's gotten you in trouble in some circles that way. And I appreciate you highlighting the fact that just because someone is Muslim, although we might theologically or even doctrinally disagree, it doesn't make them an Islamicist.
Right.
But when you take a look at 2 billion Muslims, if only 10% of them are radicalized jihadis, I mean, that's a very large amount. That's 200, 200 million. people globally can make a big, big difference, especially in a world where of immigration in the West and, like you mentioned, the Islamic Brotherhood, with the intention of turning Western civilization over. And you, going back to what you've written about as far as the role of Islam in the last days, do you still hold a deep conviction that Islam or the Islamic belief system is going to be a major, major part of the playing out of end times, Jacob's trouble, what's taking place in the Middle East right now with Israel, future covenants and peace agreements? And how do you think that's going to impact believers here in the West? What I'm trying to get to is if this is going to be something that shows up politically, geopolitically, not just over there, but over here, Christians have a choice in how they're going to respond to that. If we're affected by anti-Semitism, we actually find ourselves allied with them to our own detriment. What do you foresee taking place here in the West, and what would you encourage believers to do in this present moment, knowing that the quote the orcs are coming?
Yeah, that's a very difficult one. I don't know what the answer is, I'll be honest with you, because you cannot. This is what's called the Islamic dilemma, is in the West, and this is actually one of the sort of legitimate arguments that the Groypers and all these disgruntled kids are making, is that if you truly stand with religious freedom, if you stand with freedom, which is what made the United States great, you know, obviously we're not going to rage if our neighbors build a synagogue in our neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to rage if they build a synagogue? Well, I mean, they're Americans. There's plenty of Muslim Americans. Um, but the problem is that there are definitely elements of Islam that are just incompatible with the values and the principles that have made America great: equality, civil liberties, freedom for all people. And, again, going to statistics, let's say you have 200, I'm sorry, let's say you have 2 billion Muslims, which is about what we have right now. Let's say only 10% are radical. It's probably closer to 20. Then you have roughly the population of the entire United States
Right.
that are radical. When we saw ISIS, what ISIS did 15 years ago in Syria and Iraq, killing hundreds of thousands of people, displacing millions of people, you're dealing with about 50,000, maybe 60,000 people. Now we're dealing with 300, 400 million radicals throughout the globe. If there is kind of, global jihad, even in the West, it's going to be unstoppable. In my opinion, the UK has fallen.
Right.
Again,
Sure seems like it.
we've imported those that, and, look, I used to, this is kind of a weird analogy, but I used to do a homeless cookout downtown Kansas City. It was a vacant lot. We used to do a cookout every night. And my model was, you get 5 Christians, but I would always invite kids from college because it was evangelistic. I wanted to reach, fellow college students. But my rule was you never invite more than 1 or 2 unbelievers, so that the believers would always outnumber the unbelievers, because otherwise it just creates a weird dynamic. And all kinds of beautiful things would happen. People would open up, would pray for people, people would get saved, would pray, healings would happen. The homeless guys would walk up and start preaching. It was always neat dynamic. But when they begin to outnumber the believers, the whole dynamic changes. And that's really what we're dealing with and seeing in the West, where you have, culturally speaking, the Islamic world is incredibly culturally confident. They are on the ascendancy. Their scriptures teach them that they are, if you read, the Quran, they are the best of people. You have the best religion. You have the best prophet. The West, on the other hand, for the past generation has been beaten over the head by cultural and Marxist education that says, you should be ashamed. When President Obama was elected, he traveled around the world apologizing. Rather than saying, no, we here in the West, the values that have gone into the Judeo-Christian values that make up the Constitution, again, freedom, liberty, equality, those values are superior
Hmm.
to Islamic law. And we have to have that type of cultural confidence that says, let's say the testimony of a woman according to Sharia law, is only half as valid as that of a man. If a woman gets raped, according to strict Islamic law, there needs to be, this is a little bit too much information, there needs to be two men who actually witnessed the penetration for it to be proven, according to Islamic law, or four women. Now, in what scenario is that ever going to be the
Right.
case?
Right.
It's ridiculous. So again, left, if you're on the left listening to me, you're like, oh, he's bashing Islam. I'm saying no. Human rights say that it's okay to say our values are superior and to have an element of cultural confidence, but we've lost it. So the West lays down the red carpet for our exotic, foreign friends, and they come in and take over and they laugh at us. And so, I don't see this as ending well. You go, what's the solution? We do need to regain a sense of cultural confidence, but not go so far as these crazy groypers. They just want to export and push out or kill every Jew, every brown person in the country. And as the father of a transracial family through adoption, I kiss black skin, brown skin, and white skin goodnight every night. It's terrifying. And I don't have a clear answer. I just know that we do need to, again, get back to that status quo, that narrow road that says we preserve freedom while, as a conservative Christian, I'm going to defend the rights of a gay person or a Muslim in my country. You should not be harassed and targeted and, etc. And then when Jesus comes back, he's the righteous judge. He's going to establish righteousness in the earth. I will wait for his rule, but until then, I'm going to defend the rights of people that I disagree with. And I might sound like a 1980s liberal, coexist, but the reality is this is the best form of government that humans can create until the righteous king comes back.
Yep.
And it's good old-fashioned Reagan conservatism, and the kids don't like that, but it's either that or it's bloodshed. And whatever, look, you go too far the Marxist side, it's bloodshed, it's human suffering. You go too far to the Nazi fascist side, it's bloodshed, it's human suffering. And we're either going to learn that lesson by seeing bloodshed, or we're going to wake up and shake off this again, this drunkenness that's taken over the
Yeah.
country.
I think we need to learn the meaning of that word, Maranatha, uh, that is our hope. And that's going to increase even more as the pressure and the facade of this present age begins to wear really thin, and the best ideas of men begin to collapse, and the persecution around us intensifies. Our hearts are going to have to, as the followers of Jesus, cry out more than ever before. Even so, Lord Jesus, come, because we recognize this world really isn't our home at this present way, the way that it is, until He comes to renew it and restore it. But Joel, we could probably go on for this. This is a heavy conversation,
Yeah.
and I think it's something that needs to be talked about. There's more questions oftentimes than answers, but at the end of the day, it points us back to Jesus, and I appreciate how you always do that. For those who are listening and they want to find out more about the resources you have available, you're super generous with your resources, which I appreciate. Where can they find your books, find your teaching videos? Tell everybody where to find that.
So my website is Joel's Trumpet. I have all of my books there, except for the newest one, available for free as PDF files. If you want to get my new book, The Gospel of the Skull Crusher, I'm only selling it through my own store. It's not on
Oh, okay.
Amazon.
Okay.
Just go to my Twitter account. I've got a link pinned at the top, or go to YouTube and go to any, Joel Richardson, go to any one of my most recent videos. And in the description, I've got all the links. I actually don't think I have the store linked on my website, which is dumb, but I've got a lot going on.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, between the links in my YouTube or the link there in my Twitter account, you can
Okay.
access all my goodies.
And a lot of your books, though, are available on Amazon, though, correct?
Yeah, yeah. Most of them are soft cover at this point.
Yep.
I've turned it over to the print on demand.
Okay. Joel, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. God bless. Hey, if you're listening, check out joelstrumpet.com for a lot of his resources. If you like this podcast, go down to the bottom, hit subscribe, follow along with us, and we'll see you next time. God bless.